Before its discovery in 1492 by Christopher Columbus, Cuba was populated by the indigenous peoples called the Taínos or Siboneyes. By the 1500s, they had died out and the Spanish colonizers brought in African slaves. These slaves worked mostly on sugar plantations. Because of Cuba's location, the English and Americans have coveted it throughout history, but to today it has remained a Spanish colony. In the 1800s, the rebellion movements began. There were many different motives. Some had communist ideals, while others did not. The Great War, or the 10 Years' War, from 1868 to 1968, was fought for freedom and civil rights. The people were finished with the overpowering Spanish rule. It so happened, though, that a new Spanish liberal governor came into power, Martínez Campos, and because he satisfied most Cubans, the small war from 1879 to 1880 didn't have enough support to move forward. From 1880 to 86, the positive process of freeing the African slaves was put in place. Unfortunately, during that time, Romero Robledo, the Minister of Colonies in Spain, enforced extremely unfavorable measures for all Cubans. This fueled the desire to achieve independence in the heart of the island. During the final war, the great revolutionary leader José Martí was killed in battle. This created a symbol which Cubans fought for. In 1897, Spain and the U.S. got engaged in warfare. President McKinley requested Spain cease its repressive measures in Cuba, and fearing war, Spain obliged. However, Cubans weren't stopping there. They wanted independence. To complicate matters, the American battleship Maine was blown up in 1989. Both Spain and U.S. declared war. Cubans were allied with the Americans, but when Spain surrendered, they had no ill feelings because of their cultural ties. In 1901, McKinley granted Cuba independence. Of course, there were some strings attached which were laid out in the Platt Amendment. President Franklin D. Roosevelt abolished this amendment in 1934. Because of the lack of a good democratic example to follow, Cuban governments in the first half of the 1900s were not really democratic. The people suffered and little progress was made. In 1952, Batista took charge of Cuba and fostered a corrupt and greedy government. This was retaliated by Fidel Castro, who was inspired by Marx's ideas, or concepts, in communist Russia. This revolutionary led an attack known as the 16th of July movement in 1953. The movement failed and Castro was sent to prison and then exiled in Mexico. After his time in Mexico, Fidel Castro returned with his brother Raul and his friend Che Guevara in 1956. They led 85 men in a guerrilla revolution campaign. In 1959, on New Year's Day, Batista finally fled. He had been demoralized and had lost support from the U.S. Therefore, the Fidelistas took control with a communist regime that has lasted to the present day. The Cuban people were happy with Fidel until they realized that it was not truly a democracy. This government was highly socialistic and dictatorial. It also resulted to very violent punishments. Castro eliminated labor unions, private schools, and completely took place of the private sector. Many Cubans emigrated to Spain, the U.S., and other countries. Fidel Castro acted as prime minister from 1959 to 1976, and then acted as president from 1976 to 2008. His government was allied with the Soviet Union and had only one political party, the Communist Party of Cuba. During the Cold War, the two superpowers of the world, the U.S. and the Soviet Union, were itching for action. Cuba had a critical role because in 1965, the U.S. had nuclear missiles in Turkey, and the Soviet Union had them in Cuba. Both countries were threatening each other, and the tensions increased. This was the closest Earth has ever been to nuclear war. However, negotiations were made and the missiles were removed. The U.S. still fosters anger and resentment towards Cuba. They have restricted trade and caused Cuba to fall into a state of poverty. However, after traveling to Cuba, I have questioned what is truly poverty. We define it as a lack of fundamentals and material goods. But Cubans are rich in culture and community. Perhaps that is what is more important, and we are the ones that are poor. The Constitution of the Republic of Cuba, Article 3. When no other resource is possible, all citizens have the right to struggle through all means, including armed struggle, against anyone who tries to overthrow the political, social, and economic order established in the Constitution. Article 6. The Young Communist League, the organization of Cuba's vanguard youth, has the recognition and encouragement of the state in its main duty of promoting the active participation of young people in the tasks of building socialism and adequately preparing the youth to be conscientious citizens capable of assuming ever greater responsibilities for the benefit of our society. Article 8. The state recognizes, respects, and guarantees freedom of religion. Article 9. The state, as the power of the people and for the people, guarantees that every man or woman who is able to work have the opportunity to have a job with which to contribute to the good of society and to the satisfaction of individual needs. That no disabled person be left without adequate means of subsistence. That no sick person be left without medical care. That no child be left without schooling, food, and clothing. That no young person be left without the opportunity to study. And that no one be left without access to studies, culture, and sports. Article 12. The Republic of Cuba espouses the principles of anti-imperialism and internationalism, and establishes its international relations based on the principles of equality of rights, self-determination of the peoples, territorial integrity, independence of states, international cooperation for mutual and equitable benefit and interest, peaceful settlement of disputes on an equal footing, and based on respect and the other principles proclaimed in the United Nations Charter and in other international treaties which Cuba is a party to. Condemns imperialism, the promoter and supporter of all fascist, colonialist, and neo-colonialist and racist manifestations, as the main force of aggression and of war, and the worst enemy of the peoples. Maintains friendly relations with those countries which, although having a different political, social, and economic system, respect its sovereignty, observe the rules of coexistence among states and the principles of mutual conveniences, and adopt an attitude of reciprocity with our country. Article 16. The state organizes, directs, and controls the economic life of the nation according to a plan that guarantees the program development of the country with the purpose of strengthening the socialist system, of increasingly satisfying the material and cultural needs of society and of citizens, of promoting and flourishing of human beings and their integrity, and of serving the progress and security of the country. Article 27. The state protects the environment and natural resources. It recognizes the close links they have with sustainable economic and social development to make human life more rational and to ensure the survival, well-being, and security of present and future generations. Article 39. The state orients, foments, and promotes education, culture, and science in all their manifestations. The state promotes the patriotic and communist education of the new generations and the training of children, young people, and adults for social life. In order to make this principle a reality, general education and specialized scientific, technical, or artistic education are combined with work, development research, physical education, and sports, participation in political and social activities, and military training. There is freedom of artistic creation as long as its content is not contrary to the revolution. Article 45. Work in a socialist society is a right and duty and a source of pride for every citizen. Chapter 14. Cubans over 16 have the right to vote. Cubans over 18 can be elected. Note that the only political parties are socialist or communist parties. Therefore, people cannot vote against communism.